as you say, in Australia, there hasn't been, I don't think there's been many statues being removed, but in Britain and America, we've had people actually illegally go down and tear down statues all across both countries. And they say that these historical figures are racist. They say that these historical figures are slave owners, for example, or held with views now that we would see as being horrific. But I want to put you to the main argument that they have for tearing down these statues is that, let's say that I'm a person of colour or I'm a black person, and I feel so utterly offended walking by a statue of, let's say, for example, a slave owner from a few hundred years ago because my ancestors were enslaved. Let's say you're a Jewish person and you walk past a statue of Adolf Hitler. You'd probably be a little bit offended. So maybe that's the kind of argument that they put towards, why we should be tearing down these statues.
Well, I would put it like the Hitler comparison is fairly asinine, to be honest. And I'd put it to you that those statues, none that I know of, weren't put up because someone was a slave trader. Even the ones who were slave traders, the statues was typically for charitable works they did, or the nation building work they did, or the contribution they made to that area. Now, I have no problem with acknowledging that, yes, their record isn't squeaky clean. That money that they used to build that area or to donate to charities was blood money. That's fine, but to actually try to erase that history and to have, again, the mob do it, not go through in a democratic society, having a vote, getting people elected, and then deciding, this is in line with our values, we're going to do that, just to tear something down and chuck it in the harbour. That's not how a civilised society works. And this entire phenomenon of appropriating the suffering of your ancestors, I find so toxic and counterproductive. Now, all of us, if we go back far enough, will have ancestors who were treated terribly. Does that mean you've got to live your life as a victim? Does that mean that you've got to see yourself as oppressed because your ancestors suffered terrible misdeeds? I just find that really quite gross, that appropriating of victimhood. What your life is now is what should concern you, not I'm not saying don't have an interest in your ancestry and your history, but that shouldn't dictate how you feel about society now and what you see. And if we're going to judge historical figures by today's standards, then who's possibly going to pass muster? Who's going to be, by 2020 standards, sufficiently progressive, who's going to have the right attitudes towards sexuality, towards gender, towards all the issues that we talk about by today's standards? Isn't there some sort of a petition to get Gandhi's statue removed in the UK? I mean, you lot have completely lost your minds, if you don't mind me saying. We're looking on from Australia, and I tell you, it is a topic for regular discussion on Sky News Australia and elsewhere about what's happening in the UK. What's happened to the sensible majority? What's happened to the people who voted only a few months back?
It's not just Gandhi. We've got Abraham Lincoln, obviously famous racist and has done terrible things for black people, and Winston Churchill, complete fascist, some people would say, and worse than Hitler. Of course, I'm joking. Should we be ashamed of our history?
No, I mean, as someone who's a migrant to Australia, a migrant to the West, there's a reason why people absolutely risk their lives, would give up anything to live in the West. They're not going there because it is something to be ashamed of, because you've built something that is just racist and oppressive and miserable. It's because that's where there actually is equality, opportunity, that you're not condemned by your birth to live a certain way. And as someone I was born in the States, but I grew up in Iran, and Iran went from being very much a Western type country, or the most Western probably in the Middle East, to becoming an Islamist dictatorship. And you saw there very quickly people's personal freedoms being eradicated, and to this day, 40 years later, women are second-class citizens. People are locked up for protesting hijab laws. People are killed for political dissent. Homosexuality is still a crime punishable by death. So you can see societies go backwards. And that's why I'm particularly concerned, because I've seen what that is, and I guess you don't have to live through it. You can just open up a history book or two and have a read. And I would hate to see that sort of mindset bleed into the West. The West is founded on enlightenment. It's about, it's why slavery was seen as such an evil sin. That's why it was eradicated. It's not embraced. There are parts of the world right now where slavery is still in practice. And it just blows my mind that people who are so obsessed about historic slavery seem to have no concern about what's happening in Libya, for example, where Africans are being bought and sold, mistreated horribly. We know it's happening, it's been documented, and yet that doesn't cause any sort of outrage compared with slavery that happened generations ago. And that's what makes me question the activists about, really, what are your priorities? Are you using this as just a way to push agendas that have got nothing to do with racism or police brutality? Or do you actually care about the issue? Because if you care about the issue, then you should care about what's happening in Libya.